Imagine a country that, in its days of glory, was united and prosperous, led by great heroes and powerful kings. This kingdom was made up of 12 tribes, all descendants of a common patriarch living under God's blessing. But over time, things began to change. Unwise rulers, high taxes, and injustices weakened this union, and gradually division began to arise. What happened next not only changed the course of this nation, but also brought about deep conflicts. Have you ever wondered how such a strong and united people like Israel divided into two kingdoms, how those who were once allies became enemies to the point of fighting among themselves? What led to this separation that affected both the politics and the faith of God's people? In this video, we will understand the story of how Israel and Judah separated, revealing the mistakes, betrayals, and rivalries that emerged. You will understand how one united kingdom divided into two, that is, into two kingdoms, the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. From this division, the northern kingdom is identified in the Bible as Israel, while the southern kingdom as Judah. We will understand how this story still teaches us about the consequences of disobedience and irresponsible leadership. Stay until the end to discover the details of this story that marked the future of a nation. The first thing we need to understand is, how did the kingdom of Israel divide? It all began after the death of King Solomon in 930 before Christ. His son, Rehoboam, took the throne of Israel, which at the time was a united nation made up of 12 tribes. However, there was much discontent, especially among the northern tribes. Solomon had placed very high taxes on the people, and everyone expected Rehoboam to ease this burden. But instead of listening to the people's complaints, which were justified, he preferred to follow the advice of the young men around him and ignored the requests for change. Then, with dissatisfaction growing, the northern tribes decided to rebel, led by Jeroboam, who had been one of Solomon's officials. This revolt divided the country into two parts, the northern tribes and the southern tribes. Rehoboam, trying to regain control, gathered an army to confront the new northern kingdom. However, God intervened, saying that the southern tribes should not fight against their own brothers. He made it clear that this division was within his plans. Thus the 10 northern tribes united with Jeroboam, making him king and forming the northern kingdom, also known as the Kingdom of Israel. During the divided kingdom period, the first capital of the northern kingdom was Tirzah, but it later moved to Samaria. It was during this time that tension began to arise between Jews and Samaritans, which later became a strong rivalry. Throughout its relatively short history, the northern kingdom was ruled by 9 dynasties, with a total of 19 kings. Many of these kings displeased God, and several came to power through violent and unjust means. The northern kingdom faced many political problems, with various conspiracies happening over time. Religiously, there was also much idolatry. Jeroboam himself, the first king of the northern kingdom, began to worship idols and even created illegal places of worship in his region. While the political separation was acceptable, the religious division was not, as the Israelites were supposed to continue worshiping in the temple in Jerusalem. The height of idolatry in the northern kingdom likely occurred during the reign of King Ahab, who was heavily influenced by Jezebel. At that time, God sent the prophets Elijah and Elisha to condemn the idolatry that was taking over Israel. Political, social, and religious corruption was also highlighted in the messages of the prophet Amos. Another prophet sent by God to the northern kingdom was Hosea, who, through his own experience with his unfaithful wife, represented the spiritual adultery Israel was committing against God. Among the most well-known kings of the northern kingdom, besides Jeroboam and Ahab, is King Omri, Ahab's father. He is remembered for his political and military achievements, but also for his idolatry, Omri was the one who transformed Samaria into the capital of the northern kingdom. However, the Bible states that he did what was wrong in the eyes of God, sinning more than the kings who came before him. Another important king was Jehu, chosen by God to end Ahab's family and bring back worship of the Lord in Israel. However, he failed to remove the golden calves that Jeroboam had set up for worship. Therefore, Jehu is remembered both for his firmness in ending the followers of Baal and for his failure to completely cleanse Israel of idolatry, maintaining Jeroboam's sin. An interesting fact is that the northern kingdom had two kings with the name Jeroboam. For this reason, the Bible also speaks of Jeroboam II, who took the throne more than 1 century after the first Jeroboam. The reign of Jeroboam II was the longest and one of the most prosperous in Israel's history, lasting 41 years. In contrast, Israel also had kings like Zimri, who ruled for only 7 days, and Shallum, who reigned for only 1 month, showing the great political instability of the kingdom. Now, returning to the history of the southern kingdom, known as the Kingdom of Judah, its capital remained in Jerusalem. Unlike the kings of the Kingdom of Israel, who came from different families, all the kings of Judah were descendants of the lineage of David. The only exception was a period of a little more than 6 years, when Athaliah, the daughter of Ahab, took the throne of Judah after the death of her son Ahaziah. During this time, Athaliah attempted to eliminate the entire royal family of Judah. She even ordered the death of her own grandchildren to ensure that no one from the house of David would survive to claim the throne. However, through God's intervention, one of her grandchildren was hidden and managed to survive, allowing the lineage of David to continue later. Overall, the kings of the southern kingdom, called Judah, were more dedicated to God's will. Worship continued to take place in Jerusalem, just as in the days of David and Solomon. However, Judah also faced problems with idolatry. Many times, the Lord sent prophets to warn about the judgment that would come because of the people's sins. Prophets like Joel, Isaiah, Micah, Zephaniah, Jeremiah, and Habakkuk called the people to repentance before Judah's fall. Unfortunately, the people did not listen and did not change their ways. During the exile, God raised up the prophets Daniel and Ezekiel, who, among other messages, spoke about the future restoration of Judah. After the exile, the prophets Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi ministered during the period when the people were rebuilding their lives in Jerusalem. Among the most important kings of Judah is King Asa, known for his devotion to God. During his reign, he removed the altars of false gods, destroyed idols, and restored the altar of the Lord. Asa also encouraged the people to follow God and obey his commandments. Even though he failed at certain moments in his life, Asa is remembered for his religious reforms and for trying to end idolatry in Judah. Asa's son, King Jehoshaphat, was also one of Judah's main kings. He continued his father's reforms and is remembered for his strong alliance with God. Jehoshaphat was dedicated to promoting religious education, sending Levites and priests throughout Judah to teach the people about the book of the law. Additionally, he strengthened the kingdom's defenses and sought to follow God's ways. However, his political alliances with the house of Ahab brought negative consequences. Another important king of Judah was Uzziah, also called Azariah. He had a long and prosperous reign, during which he strengthened the kingdom's defenses, built towers, and encouraged agriculture. In the beginning, Uzziah was faithful to God, and his early years of reign brought great prosperity to Judah, something that had not been seen since the reign of Solomon. However, at the end of his life, he made a grave mistake by trying to burn incense in the temple, a task reserved for the priests, and was punished with leprosy for it. Another important king to mention is King Hezekiah, who stood out in biblical history for his religious reforms and his loyalty to God. During his reign, he ended idolatry in Judah, tearing down altars, breaking pillars, and destroying idol poles. Hezekiah also trusted God to protect Jerusalem during the siege by the Assyrian king Sennacherib, resulting in a miraculous deliverance. Furthermore, he experienced a personal miracle when God extended his life by 15 years. Another notable king of Judah was Josiah, remembered as a great reformer. He was dedicated to restoring the true worship of God. During his reign, the Book of the Law was rediscovered in the temple, which motivated Josiah to implement several religious reforms. He destroyed places of idol worship, celebrated Passover as it had not been done since the time of the judges, and restored the Temple of Jerusalem, cementing his reputation as one of Judah's most devout kings. On the other hand, King Manasseh of Judah is remembered negatively in biblical history. He reigned for about 55 years, but his reign was an example of poor leadership and idolatry in the southern kingdom. Manasseh introduced extreme pagan practices to Judah, including the sacrifice of his own children and the desecration of the Temple of Jerusalem by placing altars to foreign gods. Although he repented at the end of his life, his actions were one of the main reasons for the future destruction of Jerusalem and the exile of the people to Babylon. Now you might be wondering, how did this story end? The divided kingdom did not last long as two independent states. The northern kingdom existed for about 2 centuries, but was eventually conquered by the Assyrians. The last king of Israel, Hoshea, was imprisoned by the Assyrians, and in 721 before Christ, the capital Samaria was invaded. From that point on, the people of Israel were taken into exile. On the other hand, the independence of the southern kingdom did not last much longer either. About 150 years after the fall of the northern kingdom, Judah was conquered by the Babylonian Empire in several offensives led by King Nebuchadnezzar. The last 3 kings of Judah were vassals of Babylon. King Jehoiakim even accepted Babylonian rule, but eventually rebelled, which led to an invasion in 597 before Christ. Jehoiakim died during the siege, and his son Jehoiakim, also called Jeconiah, took the throne for a short time before being deported by Nebuchadnezzar. Then Jehoiakim's uncle, Mattaniah, was appointed king, with the new name Zedekiah. However, Zedekiah also rebelled against Babylon, resulting in a major invasion of Jerusalem in 586 before Christ, when the temple was destroyed and the people were taken en masse into exile. The last king of Judah was forced to watch his children be killed and was then taken blind to prison in Babylon. In conclusion, the story of the division of the kingdom of Israel teaches us about the consequences of disobedience to God and poor leadership. We saw that this division was marked by rebellions, idolatry, and injustices, reflecting great political and spiritual corruption. But despite all the chaos, God allowed this division to fulfill his purposes, showing that he was in control the entire time, even during judgment. Thus, the period of exile for God's people was, without a doubt, a time of great suffering and learning, but it was also part of the divine plan. God had a clear purpose in allowing his people to be taken to Babylon. This time of discipline began exactly as God had warned through the prophets, and also had an end marked by his great power and mercy. During the years of exile, the people of Israel were led to reflect on their mistakes, especially the idolatry and disobedience that had distanced the nation from God. When the time of exile came to an end, as promised, God began to restore his people. It was not merely a physical return to the land of Judah, but a true spiritual renewal. The faithful remnant, those who continued to trust in the Lord during captivity, were freed and led back to their homeland. This liberation was not just a political matter, but also the fulfillment of divine promises made centuries before by the prophets. The rebuilding of the temple was one of the greatest milestones of this return. The temple, a symbol of God's presence among his people, had been destroyed by the Babylonians, but now, under the leadership of men like Zerubbabel, Ezra, and Nehemiah, it was raised again. This work of reconstruction was accompanied by great challenges and opposition, but the people persevered, knowing they were fulfilling God's plans. In addition to the temple, Jerusalem, the holy city, was also rebuilt. Its walls were restored, not only for physical protection, but as a symbol of the restoration of the identity and security that God offered to his people. This revitalization of Judah was not just an act of material reconstruction, but also a reconnection with God and his covenant. This restoration was a prelude to something even greater, the preparation of the way for the advent of the Messiah. Prophets like Isaiah and Jeremiah had already foretold that after the period of exile, the way would be prepared for the arrival of the one who would bring ultimate redemption to God's people. The return of the people to Judah, the rebuilding of the temple and Jerusalem, and the spiritual renewal marked the beginning of a new era which would culminate in the birth of Jesus Christ, the promised Messiah. Thus, the exile was not merely a punishment, but a time of refinement, preparing the hearts of the people to receive the Savior. The story of the restoration of God's people after the exile reminds us that even in times of discipline and apparent defeat, God is working to fulfill his greater purposes, which go far beyond what we can imagine. The Babylonian exile, in fact, was not simply a punishment applied by God to his people. It was a time of deep spiritual refinement, where God was purifying Israel, removing the impurities of idolatry and disobedience. During this period of separation from the Promised Land, the people of Israel had to face divine silence and the loss of the temple, the center of their worship. This suffering, however, brought great learning. Without the temple and far from their land, the people began to value the scriptures and the words of the prophets even more, learning to connect with God in a deeper and more spiritual way. This process of purification was painful, but necessary for the hearts of the people to be ready for a greater transformation. Over the course of 70 years of exile, the Israelites experienced a renewal in their faith and devotion to God. The captivity functioned as a sort of spiritual desert, a place of solitude and trial, where God shaped the character of the nation. The exile not only healed the nation of its idolatry, but also revived a sense of total dependence on the Lord, which was essential for the mission that was to come. Now, write here in the comments if you are already familiar with the story of the divided kingdom of Israel, and share this video so more people can also understand this story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos, and may God bless you.